Welcome to this edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting. I'm Neal, your host, with this little lovely red. It's got quite a unique nose. It's already quite expressive too. If you're joining, let us know so that we might welcome you aboard and taste this particular wine together. So we have, wow. I was going to say a few other things, but this wine just keeps jumping out of the glass right at me. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed a beautiful week of food and wine and loved ones, a la Valentine's Day. We had a great night last night at the restaurant, as well as we have all week long from the weekend prior to this night, and a pretty full docket this week coming up to the weekend. So people are out celebrating, having a good time, which has been a delight, enjoying some wines and some food as well, which is also fantastic. So if you're with us, drop me a line. Let me know that you're with us. And I'm seeing some comments now just rolling in. Dean and Bobbin, good evening to you. Welcome. Gosh, this is fascinating nose. That's later. I'm getting ahead of myself. So if you're with us and you're looking at this particular wine, what do you see? What do you note? And if you're new joining us and you've not done this before, we oftentimes are looking for a couple of things on the visual aspect of the wine before we even get into smelling or tasting the wine. We can learn a lot from the nose. Karen and Rebecca, hello. Rob and Kathy, good evening. Welcome. Howie and Julie, welcome to you too. Excited to have you with us. So as we're looking at this wine, as you swirl the wine a little bit, you look at the color, of course. You look at sort of the intensity of the wine, how deep a color is that, how rich is the pigmentation. You look at where it ends up on the glass as you swirl it and what happens from that point. We can learn quite a bit about a wine, and in many cases, what a wine isn't. For example, if it's red, it's not going to be Sauvignon Blanc. And so you learn a bunch about wine right off the bat just from a visual. Sarah and the gang, welcome. Glad to have you with us this evening. The Kavitskis are here, are with us from Pennsylvania, which is awesome. Delighted to have you. Gosh, yeah, I can't place that. We're going to get to that, right? So as you're swirling this wine and you're looking at it, what color is it? Is it a reddish color, a purplish color? Is it light in color? Can you see through it? Could you read a newspaper through it? Could you not see your fingers through it even? Is it super opaque and deep and rich? Either end of those spectrums and anywhere in between starts to tell you a little something about the wine and the potential grapes it might be, where it might be from. So the grapes are something you might pick up on in the way of color and the intensity. So if it was super light in color, and you could read a newspaper through it, maybe we'd be talking more about, say, Pinot Noir versus something that was sort of deep, dark, purplish in color and could not see anything through it. And maybe we'd be talking about something like Petit Verdot or Tannat, maybe Malbec, for example. So it depends on the place and the style and other factors too, but you start to build a profile just based on color alone. And then as you swirl, right, you get an indication of where the wine creates a rim, and that rim, does it form in sheets coming back down the glass? Does it form in little tiers that then stay and linger as legs? And how persistent are they? How slow do they move? How thick are they, right? So Robert's helping us out right now with the first note and then some backups from him. Deep garnet, watery rim with a hint of brown amber. So that garnet is not just kind of a ruby red color. It's got a browning quality, a brown amber element he notes there. Not super opaque. It has a little bit of lightness to it, but it is also not light all the way through. So we're medium body potentially, as Julie's noting. Garnet ruby color there too. Martha and Matt, good evening. Welcome to you. Little tiny tears, right? Yeah, they're there. They're forming. I don't know if you can see this via the camera, but they're there. They go pretty fast, relatively fast. There's a couple that are going slower, just as I said, fast, just because how it works. So couple that with the moderate opaqueness of this wine and the slower but persistent kind of tears. We're not talking about super fast ones. We're not talking about like almost water sheeting on the side of it. This is a factor of ripeness and potential richness in the wine. And so All that to say that this could be a moderately rich wine or moderately alcoholed wine, a wine coming from a number of places. It doesn't necessarily narrow it down very easily, but we know that it isn't a very cool climate, light wine, easygoing. It isn't also a super rich, tears that are super thick, viscous. Port even, for example, would be something high alcohol, high sugar, with super thick tears and legs. So you're learning a little bit more about this wine. It's a medium-bodied red wine with ruby kind of garnet color. There's a little bit of ambering element. Robert noted too that there's a little bit of a watery rim or a meniscus right here on the edge. If you look at the rim, there's a hint of a watery separation from the rest of the color. So there's almost a clear or see-through rim. That's an indication potentially of some alcohol. And that alcohol could be from a warmer climate, part 2, right? Or a warm vintage in any climate. And so this is little factors that we have to keep as we build our profile. Curtis, Renee, Bill, Debbie from Fredericksburg, cheers to you. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Happy to have you with us this evening. We're just going through the visual assessment of this wine, noting that it's kind of ruby, but more garnet kind of color. There's a tawnied element. There's a browned element here, which could also be an indication of some age. So this might have a little bit of age on it. That drop of color, that browning, think about it just like what happens to, say, an apple. There's an oxidation. If you leave an apple out on the countertop, it turns brown. And some of pigmentation in this wine also can fall out in the form of tannin, in the dropping of the tannin and the skin contact in the wine in the form of sediment. And so as that sediment falls out of the wine, as it ages, it goes a little bit more on the brown side of things. It turns a little bit tawnied or garnet as opposed to ruby. The gosh, the nose. I'm getting ahead of myself just completely on that. So going back to the visual, we know that there's a little bit of a watery meniscus, maybe a little bit higher alcohol. Because of that higher alcohol, we're talking about a moderate to moderate plus kind of profile. We're seeing a little bit of an opaqueness through the wine. It's richer in appearance, but it's not super deep dark. I mean, I can make out my fingers through it, but I couldn't read through the wine in any way, shape, or form. That kind of bronze kind of amber quality to the wine itself character indicates potentially some age. So it's something we'll have to determine more as we taste and smell the wine. We'll go from that going forward as we taste and smell. So let's just do that. Let's smell it. As I've said, I've already been there. As soon as I opened this wine, it was already offering quite a bit in the way of aroma. Gosh. We're always looking for a few things: fruit, earth, and wood. So what do you see? What do you smell in the way of fruit, earth, and wood? I like your descriptor there, Dean, very much. A big punch that subsides into a light jab. Yeah, there's quite a pronounced quality of character in the nose. Curtis, for sure, the barnyard. Some leather notes. Yes. It's fruit, earth, and wood. This is more on the earthy wood side, kind of expressing itself. There is fruit for sure, berry or cherry, as Karen's just noting right now for us, which is great. But there's a lot of other things beyond just fruit. There's a quality of like, I'm having a taste memory flashback, right? I was in Australia, we were tasting wines, and one of the like little snacks we were given were like sesame grissini or breadsticks with sesame on it, and then a dukkha. And the dukkha is like a spice mix that you might dip the breadsticks in some olive oil and then put it into the dukkha. And that had cumin and coriander and spices to it. Really wonderful. Oh, gosh. Chris, you get 2 wines then out of the circumstances. Forgot about this and are jumping back over to the other wine. You can go back and forth. You can save the other wine for after, or you can two-fist it, right? You can have cleansing with one wine and then working this wine. Huge when you poured it. So Robert and Dean and I've all had the same kind of experience that it was expressive. As soon as you poured it, boom, there was this punch of aroma. Some of that's blowing off. Red berries, baking spices. Yes, let's add baking spices to the mix there. And they're toasted. They're not just fresh spice. There's a toasting quality to this, which I think is an indication that we're looking at some wood. Wood can oftentimes present itself as baking spices, as spice. And then that toast, the actual wood itself, the barrel, has been toasted. It's been oftentimes a light toast to a heavy toast, and some variation in between is possible. But it actually is a barrel itself when it's made. The tops and bottoms are not put on, and it's put over a fire to toast it. So, a little bit of pepper, some red fruit. There's a whole bunch here. This is a delight, right? You can feast on the aroma alone, which is wonderful. Gosh. So most of these spices would indicate some wood. This wood could come from anywhere. I mean, it's more seemingly French oak in orientation, but I could be wrong about that as we get into more of the sampling of it. But you can bring that oak anywhere in the world. So there isn't necessarily a tell on the nose that I'm picking up that leads you from the old world to the new world. And I know that's now, we've talked about that a couple of times, where that's now not necessarily something we need to focus on from the actual organizations that teach blind tasting and certify sommeliers. They're not necessarily focused on old world and new world anymore, because it's very difficult to pick them out. But there's an indication that we've worked with for years in terms of higher acidity, some earthen notes, qualities that you would find typically in the old world that you don't find in the new world. And again, as we're trying to build a profile, we're not linking ourselves specifically to that one thought, but we're trying to figure out where should we go and can we weed out other parts of the world. So that black pepper is for sure coming out for me more, Sarah. Absolutely. That earthy element. Let's taste the wine if you haven't already. Ooh. Chris, what were you drinking? This is interesting, huh? So with your first sip, just let anything that you have kind of top of mind that just jumps out, come out, and take note of it for yourself. Share it, certainly. But you're also looking with your first sip to kind of evaluate the taste of the wine as opposed to sort of the flavors. And by the taste, I mean, where's the acidity at? Where's the tannin at? Where's the overall body, mouthfeel richness of this particular wine? How does it present in that way? What's the finish like? Is it long? Is it short? So is it sort of 10 seconds or less and then it's gone? Is it 10 to 20 seconds, sort of moderately there? Or is it 20 seconds long and you're just kind of, you can still taste it, it's persistent? Where's it at in that regard? Curtis, I hear you. A little bit lighter. There's a fine quality of tannin here, though, right? There's a little bit of tannin. There's a freshness to the wine overall with all those spices and earthy notes that I wasn't quite anticipating too. Grilled meat. It's meaty. Fun. So, body. It's a tough one. It's not light, but it isn't robust either. But the tannins kind of linger at the end that make it push it maybe medium plus, but it's more like a light medium in the body first part of it. And then the body last part of it is a little bit richer thanks to the tannin that I don't really perceive up front as much. Is everybody else experiencing the same thing? The acidity is high, which helps with that freshness. Medium plus. I mean, I don't mean high as in high acidity, but it is higher acidity. Robert, you're picking up a little bit of bitterness too, some phenolic bitterness, some of that tannin astringency, maybe some whole cluster element. So when we talk about whole cluster in wine, it's actually pressing the whole cluster as opposed to taking the berries from the cluster. And when you do that, sometimes you pick up a little bit of tannin that comes by way of the seeds and the skins There's kind of a green astringency that can sometimes be a result. It's also oftentimes a way that you get a little bit more lightness in the wine. Like there's not the same kind of extraction because you're not trying to extract as much from just the berries. You don't want to extract all of that green element or some of the astringent notes from the seeds and the stems. So you do a more gentle press, which means you don't get as much kind of concentration. And that could be part of what's happening here. So there's varietals like Pinot Noir, Syrah, Gamay. Some Austrian varietals are ones that oftentimes get a little bit of this whole cluster treatment. You don't see it as much, say, with Bordeaux varietals. You might see it with some Grenache or Rhone varietals. With all the aromas we picked up, and then the variety of kind of, I won't say it's disjointed because it has sort of a continuum of experience, but there are distinctive elements of the experience on the palate that are not quite seamless. This might be an indication of a blend, right? Where different grapes are presenting and offering different elements in this particular bottle or in this particular wine. So, Gamay, Sarah's noting, and maybe Carmenere. So Carmenere, that astringency you do pick up a lot of times because oftentimes you'll get more of a pyrazine greeny note. And I'm not picking up a whole bunch of herbal or green pepper kind of notes here. And there is absolutely a little funk. We picked up some of that funk on the nose, and it's certainly on the palate too. There's a bunch going on here. And there's a quality about this, like that spicy element, that breadstick, the sesame, the baking spice that we were talking about. That's oak, right? So from that standpoint, I said we could be talking about oak from anywhere, but there are places in the world that are definitely renowned for using oak. Like let's say Rioja. Rioja will use American oak in particular. Other places like Burgundy will use oak for sure. Many places use oak, but other places have the choice of it. It's not necessarily the signature of the place. Ooh, some dark chocolate with this might be fun. Yes. Curtis is thrown out there that we're looking at maybe a GSM. So Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, or Grenache, Shiraz, Mataro, if you're in Australia, which I tasted a beautiful one today from the McLaren Vale. That grilled aspect, yes, absolutely could be something that you're going to get from the oak element in terms of some of the spice notes and the toasted spice notes. Some of that grilled meat, that roasted meat element is sometimes a signature of Syrah. And so this going back to the Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre note, that could be absolutely something we're talking about here. So if we're talking about a GSM blend, Syrah Merlot blend, also an option. A nice Syrah Merlot from somewhere in, say, Spain or somewhere in southern France where you might get those things grown together. That's certainly an option. You can certainly find that too in other parts of the world like Australia and places that grow Syrah and Cabernet blend grapes. This nose is so alluring. I'm like wanting to place it because of a taste memory. It's not one I think I've had in wine. So I'm kind of excited about this, and that at the end of this, in the conclusion, we'll have a new taste memory, or at least I will, that equates to that nose, and that will teach me something, which is exciting. This wine's a little reminiscent to me of a wine or wines in general that might come from Lebanon. There's sort of that lifted acidity we noted, that spice note coming from some wood, some leaner fruit, but still ripe. This tension there. It's fascinating wine. So let's start to try to narrow it down. I mean, at this point, we're 20 minutes in. We should start to see a little shift in the wine if there is one. Sort of the slow play on the wine, and it eventually reveals more of its hand to us about 20, 22, 24 minutes in, and we're 20 minutes in now. Pour yourself another little bit from the bottle to see if it changes or gives you something else from the wine. It's so roasted. That meat, it's really meaty. So that just takes me to Syrah. It's kind of hard to not talk about Syrah, and less about Syrah from Australia, from the New World. Like this, Chris mentioned that he's drinking a Central Coast wine. I wouldn't pick this as Central Coast, California. This is, more akin to what you might find from the Northern Rhone of France. Maybe some interesting places in the southern part of France. I don't think I would place this necessarily, say, in Spain, but it could have an element there. Martha, you're picking up some flowery elements. Cool. There's a little kind of blue flowery note for me. A Rhone blend kind of situation, Sarah is saying, or maybe even just one of the varietals from the lesser known varietals of the Rhone blend. So Carignan, Sanso, Corbière, very interesting, going back to that sort of Syrah Merlot potential idea from Robert. Dean Corbière absolutely could be something we could consider here. So southern France. Cunoise, nice, Julie. if Julie, our Julie put Cunoise in here, that'd be pretty amazing. I don't think I've tasted a single varietal Cunoise. So, but I think that also maybe, as we were talking about earlier, relative to the nose and even how the palate is kind of framed, it probably isn't just one varietal. We could be talking about a blend here. So France near Spain, it sort of seems like we're kind of centralizing our thought process on beginning with the GSM idea and then finding ourselves in southern France, maybe in northern Spain, maybe right in that range. Tablas Creek is delicious. Gosh, if this was Tablas Creek, that'd be awesome. So I could be completely wrong saying it can't be Central Coast, and then it'd be Tablas Creek, and it's sort of Central Coast, and it's beautiful. Gosh, I haven't had one. I mean, they have a lovely kind of spiced, earthy note that comes out in their wines that isn't just straight California, but I haven't had one that really presents as profoundly this from them that I can remember. Admittedly, I haven't had one in a little bit, but for those that don't know, Tablas Creek makes Rhone-style wines with the Perrin family and the Haas family in the Central Coast. The Perrin family makes Chateau de Beaucastel in the Rhone, and then they ventured to make another project in California, and they brought over clippings from their vines and created a nursery, and that nursery is used by many people. So just beautiful stuff. Yeah, this is like cured meats, smoked meats, grilled meats, like on graham crackers. I mean, so it's got wood, it's got fruit. Let's go back to our original kind of visual, see what that tells us. Go back to the nose, see what that tells us, and kind of work that with the palate and see what we know. So man, it's pretty tasty. It's opening up. Some of that tannin softening a little bit on the end. So we know this is deeper red color, watery meniscus, kind of thin, fine legs that form and hold. There's not a real load of alcohol on the palate that kind of goes back to that visual. It's moderate in weight. It's lighter up front, more robust toward the end, sort of blending to create a moderate medium weight. Just delicious wine that would fit the profile kind of Syrah, of a lighter Grenache Syrah kind of blend. Corbière and that Merlot Syrah. I don't know if this is big, but we're getting a little bit of whole cluster, so that might lighten the expression. I like the idea. I'm not finding like that plum note. I'm not finding that kind of deeper note that you might find from Merlot. So I might not go with the Syrah Merlot blend, but you could pick up Syrah, you could pick up a little Grenache, you could pick up some other elements that are in this. There might be a dollop of Merlot that could be kind of neat as part of a lengthier blend, a la something you might find in Corbière. Pétlin de Tavis, oh gosh. Yeah, that's delicious. So Pétlin de Tavis, right, are the wines that came from the nursery. So the vineyards cuttings that went to other people's vineyards that they then sold back to Tavis to make into wine. It's pretty dang good. Those are tasty wines. Yes. I can't remember. I mean, we haven't done a Rhone wine, I guess, in a little while. This has some definite elements of the Rhone or the Rhone elsewhere. Okay. So where do you want to plant your flag, folks? Most of us seemingly are in the old world and are toying with some variation on the world between the Rhone and, say, northern Spain. I don't think, right, just to go back through some options, right, I don't think we had mentioned Austria up front. I don't think it's necessarily Austria. It has some characteristics of some Austrian wines for sure. And so if you had a blend of Zweigelt and Blaufränkisch and elements there, that could be interesting. The Italian wines, I don't see this necessarily as being Italian. It doesn't have the characteristic that we normally find of sort of that earthen element that also has some of that acid and the characteristics of flavors. Just takes me more toward Grenache than it does toward Corvina or Nebbiolo or Sangiovese or other varietals from Italy, and generally like a little bit more giving richness. So what else? It's really more about Spain. It's not Portugal to me, really. No, I don't think so. Gosh, there's a lot more to learn about and know about in Portugal. We've tasted some very interesting wines from Portugal as of late that are not just the Douro River reds that are awesome and richer in profile. There's some lighter ones. This could be that too. There's just a lot of wood here that's cocoa and spices. So I think for me, the best guess is going to be more in the French Syrah Grenache, other varietal, more Vedra. So not Grenache Syrah, more like there's a Syrah note here, which might take me into southern France. Dean Stuck. Yeah, I'm with you. I feel that completely. As a fun little thought experiment, just before we rush to the final end, or before we put our final flag in, how would you describe this wine? We've been using fruit, earth, wood as tells to build profiles, and the profile takes us to a certain place, right? That place is linked then in our minds as we train our minds to certain flavor profiles, certain characteristics about a wine. I was thinking about this today as I was tasting wine with some of our reps and some of our team. Could we build a profile that was personified? So if you were to personify this wine, what would it be like, right? So for example, we tasted a wine earlier today, and it was very lean and muscular, but not like a ballerina who is lean and muscular. It was more like someone who did parkour, lean, muscular, and capable of great feats. And it seemed tight and tense and like a little spring, and had a little rough edges because it could bounce off of something. It was hard in a way. And so I started building this profile in my head of this wine wasn't a ballerina, but it was a parkour athlete. And I've certainly tried other wines where it's like, gosh, is this wine to use a football analogy, right? Is it a halfback or is it a linebacker? Is it quarterback? You know, where does this fit? Is it Jackie Chan? I love that, right? So Jackie Chan, flashy, fun, exciting, interesting, dynamic. We can start to build general profiles of wines that are otherwise not necessarily flavor, fruit, earth combinations, or the people that we're associating with the these wines, begin to know, like, you start to have a visual image in your head of when you taste something that prompts a memory. It's like knowing someone, and you know where that someone comes from. So linking. And part of a way maybe we can think about adding to how you build out your own profile of taste and recognize certain characteristics. Well, it's got the cut of this individual, but it's not quite the same, and so it's adjacent. Christopher Walken, more cowbell. Yes, always more cowbell. There's an exotic kind of quality to this. The spice, there's a leanness, there's kind of a brashness to this, but it's not in your face. So it's just what it is. It's had some gruffness that hasn't been polished out. It's an elegant person who smokes a lot and has a little raspy voice. It's just a fun way to think about wine in a different way, and a way that may or may not help you as you build profiles in your mind with your tasting. And how does that relate to your recall of a particular wine? Because sometimes when we're saying, oh, I smell cherry, and the cherry is nuanced and different, and it's not the same cherry, you can get into parsing out cherry. It's difficult then to just use that word cherry to know, are we talking about the cherry from the Willamette Valley, the cherry that you're going to get from the Central Coast, the cherry you're going to get from Burgundy? It's just different. So it's a Parisian Rhone. Oh, Janine, welcome. Hello. Always more cowbell. Yes. Well, Janine, from your standpoint, if you don't have the wine and you've heard us kind of talk our way through it, anything jump out for you by our descriptions? Oftentimes we get really close from someone who has watched this for a while and isn't necessarily tasting the wine, but picks up on some of the descriptors, and that references something fun for them, and they make their way into a guesstimation of what the wine is in a way that some of us sometimes with the wine can't do. So okay, well, yeah, this is neat. There's like part of me that wants this to be Rioja too. Rioja with like Tempranillo and Graciano in it, because the wood's there. And I'm giving pause to that sort of GSM, and I'm throwing another lob right here in the last minute. Like Alavesa, part of Rioja where you're going to get a lighter expression. It's not Rioja Alta, like where you get the concentration. This is just kind of Crianza, easy, light, just beautiful, fun. 2020. We're talking 3 to 5 years age probably on this. It has a little bit of age though, right? We talked about that browning quality. So GSM is sort of still out there for everybody. I like that call. I'm comfortable with that call. I think I'm going to just deviate because of the woody note. I'm going to go a little bit. I'm going to be in Spain. I'm going to just do it. I'm going to say Spain 2020. I'm going to say a blend though, so it's not straight Tempranillo. And yeah, that wonderful earthy element that's there, the barnyardy meat, cured meat, probably Syrah, but I'm going to stick with the Tempranillo Graciano. I'm going to go Rioja. All right. What you're witnessing now is me talking myself into that. Rhone GSM 18, like it. The some Carignan maybe in there too. Yep, multi-blend. You ready? You guys ready? Oh, very cool, guys. Nice job. So this is Rhone, Carène. It's Côte du Rhône, and looking for, so Carène's one of the villages of the Côte du Rhône, and this is a cru. So like Gigondas, like Vacqueyras, for example, like Châteauneuf, a cru site. Karen, is that very cool? And it doesn't say here that I can see what the grapes are in this, but we can assume Grenache and Syrah and Mourvedre and maybe others. And 2017. So Chris, you were very close. Nice job. Excellent. That's a good wine. That's a great find. So very cool. Syrah Grenache, mostly Grenache. Cheers. Thank you. Awesome. Great expression of old world Karen. So not to be confused with Carignan. It's this is the place. Carignan is the great, but not in this one. Grenache and Syrah. Awesome. Nice find, Julie. That's a fun one. So, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy the rest of this. Cheers, everybody. For those of you that have a free calendar and are looking for some more wine tasting and some more great discussion relative to wine, we've got Spain coming up, and that has, I think, 2 more spots available. Jonas Gustafsson is joining us, and he's a one-man importer who works his way all around Spain and just has a tremendous palate. We'll be tasting a series of wines from around Spain, from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. And then that's coming up in a week, a little less than a week, on Wednesday, the 21st. The March wine dinner that we're going to do is with Wonderment Wines. And gosh, Stephanie, the winemaker there, making some really cool Petit Syrah and Zinfandels, some Pinot Noir from California. She's based here in the East Coast, but flies out to California, kind of makes her wine out that way and then brings it back. Just really cool dynamic wines that aren't huge, but are balanced and have a delicate quality to them, not in a fragile way. They're light, right? They have a lift to them. Really beautiful wines. Those are in March. In April, we're going to be joined by Michael Shaps and talking about wines here in Virginia that he's making, wines in Burgundy that he's making in France. Both. We'll be tasting both and bantering back and forth and just trying to understand the wonderful world of wine according to Michael Shaps, who is a remarkable winemaker and just makes so much happen in the world of wine, both in Burgundy and here in the Old Dominion. So some fun wine events on the docket. If you're interested, please, by all means, sign up for those via our website. And I think we have 2 or 4. I haven't yet confirmed that with Nick and Carolyn for our Bordeaux trip. So if you've got the end of June free and you're looking for a trip, we're going to do a river cruise and tour of the various regions of the Bordeaux Aquitaine kind of region, and spend some time eating and drinking and hanging out and blind tasting a little bit together. So if you're interested in that, you can also find some details for that on the website. I think we have 2 or 4 spaces left. So cheers, everyone. Thank you so much for playing along. Great to have you with us. Loved the work that you did. You got us right to where we should be, and then I jumped off the ship. But all of you were still there, and that's a wonderful thing to see. It's really neat to be in a tasting with a group of folks now where someone's like Dean threw out Corbière, right? Like, this is a level of specificity and detail that is a privilege to taste with. So cheers, everybody. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.